One of the biggest challenges in customer experience is alignment. How do you get other departments, teams, leaders to all align around what customer experience should look like for your organization? And I don't know that there's been a good answer to that all in one place until now. My friend Jeannie Walters has finally written the book that we all need. Experience is everything. And Jeannie, I want to make sure I get the subtitle correct. Making every moment count in the age of customer expectations. I'm so excited for your book, and I have to start with a question that you answer in the introduction. What is customer experience?
I love it. I love it. Well, as you know, we talk a lot about customer experience and sometimes it gets conflated with customer service. My definition is that customer experience is really the holistic, proactive, intentional, the whole journey that your customers have, every interaction, and what they walk away with from that, their perceptions, their emotions, everything.
I like how succinct you are with that. And I say this because I ask a lot of people that the same question,
Hmm.
and there's a lot of hemming and hawing, and well, how do I explain this?
Yes,
So,
yes,
hey,
I know. I know. And I sometimes buck the trend of because a lot of people answer it as the perception, like it is the perception, but I really think like your customers are having a customer experience whether you talk about it or not. That's still happening. So you have to get clear on what that is, and that's about the entire journey and all those interactions that we have.
that's so true. And I'll also say that I one of the things I appreciate about your definition is, well, it might be in your words, it matches what I would say is pretty much the standard definition of customer experience.
Hmm.
There's a challenge in the workplace where everyone's crafting their own definition, and I think that just makes it difficult to understand.
It
What are we
does.
talking about?
It does. It does make it difficult. And I think that's part of the challenge that customer experience leaders have is sometimes they're in charge of maybe a portion of the journey, maybe they're in charge of certain parts of it and they're told like hands off of this. And so that makes it hard too. We have to kind of get our arms around all of it.
So you did the right thing, I think. Bravo to you that you answered this in the introduction before we even get started. Let's get on the same page.
Yep.
And I think that what I enjoyed about the book is that a lot of it was about getting on the same page.
Hmm.
And there's one thing that you talk about in the book. I think you're right to put it all the way on page 73. I had to check my notes, but it was one of the most important elements of the book, which is aligning this idea of customer experience with what your CEO and your executive team actually
Hmm.
cares about.
Hmm.
And I think that's a challenge for a lot of people when they're trying to get the organization to focus on customer experience. So maybe the short version, how do you do that?
Yeah, I mean, you're right that this whole book is about alignment. It's about making sure that you're all speaking the same language, that you're defining things the right way. And we do that through mindset, strategy, discipline. That's kind of the three parts of the book. And what you're talking about is really strategy. And it's about making sure that you are starting with understanding your organizational outcomes and what is most important to your leaders. Because I think traditionally, customer experience has been kind of bottom up. Like, we're like, look at the insights, like, help us, right? And if they're not connected to those overall goals that your entire organization is looking at, then it's very easy to be dismissed. And I think that happens a lot to customer experience leaders. So we use something called the Customer Experience Success Blueprint, which, I should have named it differently because it's hard to say fast, but the whole the whole idea is starting with your organizational goals and what your leaders care about, and then really getting real about what can we actually impact and influence with the different parts of customer experience. And what are we predicting will happen if we do that? Can we lower cost? Can we improve revenue? Can we improve retention? And how will that impact those bigger goals? So it's all connected, but you have to really be strategic about it and define it for your organization.
And I like how you're suggesting really that we work backwards versus kind of saying, hey, we really want to improve customer experience. Now, what's that going to do for us?
Right.
And you're saying, well, let's start with the organizational goals and talk about how customer experience can enable that. Am I
That's
getting
right.
that right?
You are absolutely getting that right. And sometimes the way I think about it is it's like any other part of the business. If you went to, if you were the head of marketing and one of your goals was increasing market share, and you were like, no, we're just going to talk to our whole marketing plan is just about our current customers and expanding in there. That's conflicting with that goal, and you would never do that. So I think that customer experience leaders, frankly, have to show up differently. We have to show up as business leaders instead of just kind of representing and advocating for customers, which is an important part of the role, but it can't be the only role. We have to make sure that we're connecting to those organizational outcomes.
I really liked a very specific piece of advice that you shared. And this is where I was joking about, like, it's all the way on page 73. But it's the listening to what your CEO or the head of marketing or product or whoever you want to influence, what are they constantly talking about? And I used to still call this the hot button.
Hmm.
And it's different for every leader, but to your point, it could be market share, it could be cost containment, it could
Hmm.
be customer loyalty. Whatever they're talking about, it tends to be if that's going well, your CEO or your leader's happy. And if it's
Hmm.
not going well, they're concerned. And I thought the advice was so spot on because that's a nice shortcut for deciding how can we impact the business.
Hmm.
The thing that I've seen not always work is trying to guess at what your CEO cares about. And when you don't hit the mark, then your CEO is just more
Right.
confused or more dismissive.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, I always think about what what my parents used to tell me about, the word assume. You can't assume, right? Because and so I think that we do that sometimes though with our leaders. And part of the exercise that we walk through is really thinking through like, what does your chief financial officer care about, right? They are not going to respond to, look, but our customers are giving us great feedback if we're not connecting that to, and that means we're getting, more share of wallet or share of market or whatever. So I totally agree. And I think that if you really watch people and you really listen to them. I mean, this is a part of the ethos of customer experience, but and you have a great section in your book, Human Service, that is all about listening and how important it is. And I think that when we really listen to our leadership, you can hear not only what they care about, but what they're willing to emotionally invest in.
Hmm.
And that is part of this. We have to connect on that emotional level and storytelling and all of that because otherwise we're just talking numbers all the time and like dashboards, and a dashboard never moved somebody to, really care. But when you tell a customer story and when you really tie that in, that helps. And if you can connect that to what your leaders really want to emotionally invest in themselves, that's the magic.
I think you're so right about that strategy that you have to have both the storytelling and the data. It
Hmm.
reminds me of one of my favorite client stories. This was more about employee experience, but there was a VP of HR. She wanted to invest in more office space. The numbers were already there. The CEO knew the numbers, but she needed that story. So she invited the CEO to address a group of new hires at new hire orientation. And they were crammed into this tiny little room. People were sitting on credenzas, leaning against walls, and a lot of them were high earning,
Hmm.
very technical, specific employees that were hard to hire. And so the CEO addresses the group, and afterwards she pulls the VP of HR aside and said, "Okay, I get your point. We'll get the space," because she realized that emotion
Yeah.
of being in the room, that was it. That's what she
Oh my
needed. So I
gosh.
think you're so spot on. You need both.
You totally need both. And I feel like the pendulum swung really far to the data side for a while,
Hmm.
and you almost weren't supposed to talk about real emotion and those real human moments. But man, if you want to get attention, just play a recording from your contact center of a really frustrated customer or share a heroic story, right? Of look at what we did for this customer and the loyalty that you'll hear in their voice when they talk about it. So I do think we have to recognize that humans need both of those things, that we need love and logic, we need heart and head, right? Like so that's how we as CX leaders have to really focus.
Speaking of focus, I think this is a really good segue into this foundation that you talk about in the very first chapter. You call it a customer experience mission, and I know it goes by a lot of different
Mhm.
names. I think CX mission works just as well as any other.
Mhm.
For the audience, this is. Um, it's the foundation. So I wonder, can you kind of just share what is a CX mission and why is it so essential that you put it chapter one?
Yeah, I really think this is the foundation for everything. And what I often say is it makes everything else easier, right? Once you've defined this, because the thing that I keep seeing over and over is that organizations say things like, we're going to be customer centric. Boom, right? Like, there we go. And they put up posters and they talk about it, but they never really define that. Or they have these kind of vision statements that are so broad and general that you and I might define best differently. And so the whole goal with the CX mission statement is to get really definitive and explicit about who are you and who are you to your customers no matter what? And what is that promise that we've made? And what are the emotions that we're trying to elicit for them? So it's literally walking through a little bit of a template because I found that so many organizations basically have the same statement. And it's to deliver the best customer experience to everyone every time. And everybody kind of thinks they get it. But when you get into what are the trade-offs we have to make? Because we can't be all things to all people. So who are we? And if you do it really well, what I love about it is that it matters to, of course, your frontline folks and your contact center and all of those, but it also matters to your procurement team, to your field delivery people, to everybody in the organization, because it's also about how do we show up for one another. And once you get that kind of into the DNA of the organization, really amazing things happen. And you can also ask the question, did we live up to this mission or not? And that's a really powerful question to really get at the heart of delivering the customer experience that is important to you.
I think that it's so essential what you described is getting everybody aligned around the CX mission. And one of the reasons that I think this sometimes fails is organizations spend so much time wordsmithing, they come up with this word salad of nonsense. So I'm always looking
What?
for great
I
examples.
don't know
I
what you're
know, right?
talking about.
Put a CEO on the spot and say, all right, what's the CX mission or what's the
Right,
mission? And you get a lot of, give me a moment, I'll look it up.
right.
So I'm going to put you on the spot, Jeannie.
Yeah.
Your company, Experience Investigators, I think
Mhm.
has a fantastic CX mission. What is it?
Thank you. So, our mission from the beginning has been to create fewer ruined days for customers. And we do that through empowering leaders in lots of different ways. But that is really the mission. And part of it is I really believe that makes a better world. I know you and I kind of share this idea that if we treat people well, if we help them achieve their goal of the day, if we, reduce that friction point for them, they're going to go off and do better things. They're going to feel better. They're going to spread that throughout. So it sounds so simple, but when you're in this work, it's not always simple, but it's something we always keep top of mind.
And top of mind to me is the important part because I can't keep a paragraph top of mind or,
Right.
you know, a thousand pages of manifesto top of mind, but I can
Right.
keep one sentence as an intention. And then what you just did now is you unpacked meaning
Hmm.
behind it. And that's where I think a CX mission is so valuable. The other place where I've seen it, and I think you really address this in your book, is making even strategic decisions or trade-offs. I worked with
Hmm.
an organization I care a lot about. It's called Kitchens for Good, and
Hmm.
their mission, which is also their CX mission,
Yeah.
is transforming lives through culinary arts. And they're
Love it.
growing rapidly. And what I see their leadership team doing is constantly evaluating, does this decision align with our mission? Yes, let's embrace it. No,
Hmm.
we're not doing it. We're not
Yep.
moving in that direction. And I think that's something you address really nicely in the book about making those trade-offs and using the
Hmm.
mission to help make those decisions.
Yeah. it is a really powerful tool if you use it as a tool. And I think a lot of people have become cynical about missions in general because they become posters on the wall, people walk by them, or to your point, they're 4 paragraphs and 17 bullets and that, they've got corporate speak. And I've had so many conversations where I've had to say, like, don't put your products and services into your mission statement, right? Like that's not what this is about. So when we're talking about the customer experience mission statement, some CEOs, they just want to say like, no, but we're high quality manufacturing. That's what it is. And it's really hard to kind of pick your head up out of that mode. And so it's one of those things where when it sounds effortless, there's been a lot of work to get there. But once it becomes that, it becomes kind of shorthand for the organization. And that's when you know it's really working is when people have internalized it to a point where, in my organization, we sometimes do that and we'll say, well, is this helping with those ruined days? Like just let's ask the question. So it's one of my favorite things. I think it's one of the most important and it's often really, really overlooked or neglected.
I I love how you spend so much time on it and so much time on getting the organization to embrace the mission and enact it. The other thing that I think that is really helpful about your book is that you then get into a lot of the details. And one of the details I wanted to ask you about is the journey map. And I
Mhm.
thought you added, I think a lot of people are familiar with the journey mapping, but you added a perspective I think that's really important, which is what's the purpose? So I want to ask you that question. What is the purpose of a
Mhm.
journey map?
Yeah, this is another one where I think like for a while the pendulum was so far over where everybody was like, we need a journey map. And that was kind of the end of the statement. And first of all, journeys are complex now. Like there is just no way around it. There are so many different avenues and channels and types of customers and everything else that saying like, let's just throw together an end-to-end journey map. That's not what it used to be. And so I find that we talk about it too as a verb, not a noun. It's about the journey mapping. It's really not about the map. Because if you focus on the end deliverable, you're going to miss all of the ways that you can improve things in the moment. It should be a tool for improvement. So the purpose is really to either take a hard look, real truths about what is the experience today and where to improve it, but also have a goal, have a scope. Make sure that you know what you're doing before you go in, because otherwise it gets very unwieldy. People spend months and months and months on it, and the world changes really fast right now, and your customers are changing really quickly. So if you spend all these months to produce this beautiful map, you're probably not going to be up to date with the reality of the situation. That's why I'm a big fan of like really condensing the scope, getting very clear on what you're trying to do and saying, okay, this is the problem, or we're trying to introduce a new product into the journey. How can we do that? Or those big questions. It's a great tool for that. But I think sometimes people think the tool is the outcome. And I have seen so many of those that take a lot of investment, a lot of resources. And at the end of the day, everybody says, cool map.
Next,
Yeah, exactly.
next initiative. Well, and I appreciate, I guess in the interest of time, I will say that I appreciate that you get into why do we do it? You have such practical advice around making it I think, a worthwhile tool, especially focusing on solving specific problems.
Mhm.
And so I appreciate that you make it accessible rather than overwhelming. And so in the interest of time, I have to ask you one last question, which is around accessing. How do people access your book? Where do they find it?
Well, I'm so glad you asked, Jeff. So, yeah, here it is. It's so pretty. So you can find it at experienceiseverythingbook.com, and we've got some perks there if you want to play with us there, but you can also find it basically wherever books are sold. And of course, you can find out more at experienceinvestigators.com as well.
Well, Jeannie, I'm a fan of you. I'm a fan of the book. I know you've been working at this for a long time
Mhm.
and you did it right. So thanks
Thank
for
you.
spending some time with me today. I really appreciate it.
Well, I always appreciate my conversations with you, Jeff. So thank you so much.